Info Factory Track for CSI, Job Receipt. Factory Track has several job receipt parameters to control the validation, displayed fields and processing options that are permitted as part of the job receipt process. These are defined on the transaction set parameters form for the job receipt transaction. For this training, we've enabled all the parameters in order to show where those fields appear in the transaction steps. One of these parameters allows the job receipt transaction to support a combined or a separated job receipt and put away process. Administrators can configure the parameters to control how the job receipt process is handled based on these parameter settings. Factory Track can allow the user to define a location into which the produced items will be put away during the receipt transaction by selecting the Enable Put Away on the transaction set maintenance. Alternatively, in a separated process, the process would default the receipt location based on the production receipt location on the Parameter tab of the Warehouse Parameters form. In order to start the receiving process, from the Info Factory Track Warehouse Mobility main menu, click on the Make It icon. This then navigates to the Production Transaction screen where you click on the Job Receipt icon. To process the job receipt transactions, the following fields are used. We enter or select from drop-down the Warehouse ID. We enter or select from drop-down the job. We enter or select from drop-down the suffix ID. Note that this defaults if only one suffix exists for the job. Factory Track then displays the item, item description, and the required quantity and unit of measure associated with that job order. If the item is a lot control field, the lot field is displayed. Enter the lot ID to be assigned. Note that if this item has pre-assigned lots, selection by drop-down would be available. Enter the quantity of items being received. If the Enable Unit of Measure parameter is enabled on the Transaction Set Maintenance form, entry or selection of a unit of measure is permitted. Specify whether the item is to be placed into a container. If yes is selected, the location field is disabled and entry or selection from drop-down of the container ID field is required. Enter document ID if you'd like to provide a value to tie the transactions together. The Enable Put Away field has been selected in the Transaction Set Maintenance form. Enter or select from drop-down the location to which the items are to be placed. Note that if this is not enabled, the location defaults to the location in the warehouse parameters and this field cannot be changed. Click on the back button to return to the previous screen. For standard and lot controlled items, the transaction fields entries are complete and the process button is available. For items that are serial controlled, additional processing is needed and the next button is displayed. So we click on the next or process buttons to continue. Note, for standard and lot items that can be processed after this step where the Allow Cross-Docking option has been selected, Factory Track determines whether there are cross-docking needs for this item. If so, the option to proceed with cross-docking is provided. For serial tracked items, assignment of serial numbers is required before completing the process. Factory Track displays the following fields based on the information provided from the previous screen. The item ID and description, the total quantity, this is based on the received quantity entered on the previous screen. The operator then specifies whether Factory Track should generate the serials. If yes is selected, then the processing options are enabled. If no is selected, the scan field indicates how many serials have been captured in the process so far. Enter the serial numbers to be assigned. Note that if the serial numbers are predefined, you may also select these from a drop-down. Once the total quantity is equal to the scan quantity, the processing options are enabled. Click on the back button to return to the previous screen. Click on Process to continue. As previously discussed, the cross-docking option is also provided if enabled and eligible. Click on Show List to see the serial numbers already captured, or Clear List to remove all of the captured serial numbers.